Today's lesson is called Freedom or Public Health, which is more valuable? Hello everyone, my name is Jeff.
My name is Roger, and the debate seems to be in regard to COVID-19. What is more important, freedom or public health? Should we allow an invasion of our privacy to protect everybody in society? Or are we going to get uptight about it and say, no, we want freedom. The government should not be keeping track of us. That's what they did in the Soviet Union.
That's what they did in the Soviet Union a long, long time ago, and that's what people think is happening in certain other countries now, like in China there. But here in Taiwan, people kind of thought we can trust the government, we can trust the CDC. So when COVID-19 came around, they had no problem handing over personal data. They did so to benefit public health. But let's say you live in a country where you, one, value your freedom and your privacy, and two, that maybe you can't trust those institutions of government like we have here in Taiwan that are inherently trustworthy. What do you do then? The debate becomes a little bit trickier, okay? So here you are, you're in the United States, you value your freedom, your privacy, so on and so forth. Also, you might not trust your government right now. What do you do then? Are you going to be willing to hand over that personal data if you think the NSA is going to take it or something like that and use it against you? Maybe not. Well, that's just one possible perspective, and we'll be talking about something like this today. Freedom or public health? Today we'll be talking about how maybe some people think that freedom might be more important than public health in some situations. We're taking the other side of the debate today, and we'll get started on that right after this.
In other places, particularly the United States and Western Europe, the idea of using private data to monitor citizens has been much more controversial. Many people simply do not trust their governments to use these tracking tools responsibly. They argue that although privacy laws may sometimes have to be partly relaxed for the greater good of public health, we should not forget that privacy itself is a right that is worth making sacrifices for. And individuals shouldn't have to give up that right in an unlimited manner just to serve the public interest.
大家好，第一部分我们看到单字 monitor， 这个字是动词，指监控、监视。例如 ，Hospitals have machines that monitor patients' heart rates。医院里有可以监控病人心率的机器。另外，这个字也可以当名词，指萤幕、显示器。我们可以说 Todd bought a new monitor for his computer, so he gave me his old one. Todd 买了一台新的萤幕，所以他把旧的给我。接下来我们看到单字 controversial， 这个字是形容词，指有争议的，引起争论的。举例来说 Films that contained excessive violence are often controversial and may even be banned in certain places. 太过暴力的电影通常有争议性，有些地方甚至会禁播。另外，补充这个字的名词 controversy， C-O-N-T-R-O-V-E-R-S-Y， controversy， 指争议、争论。像是 The school's decision to start classes earlier was a huge controversy among students. 该学校决定提早上学时间在学生间引起很大的争议。再来，我们看到一个单字 responsibly， 这个字是副词，指负责的、有责任心的、可靠的。例如 The police officer took care of the injured citizen responsibly. 这名警察尽责地照顾受伤的市民。接着我们看到副词 partly， 指在某种程度上、部分的。我们可以说 Both drivers are partly to blame for the accident. 两方的驾驶在某种程度上都要为此车祸负责。或是 I didn't go to the gym after work.Partly because I was too tired. 我下班后没有去健身房，部分原因是因为我太累了。
Okay, so we're talking about different places in the world that accept these measures of privacy being invaded for the sake of the common good. So, yes, indeed, we mentioned some examples last time. There's an app in Singapore that can trace people, and then in other places, of course, they have data gathered from different sources to let people know that they've got this disease, and they let other people know they've come in contact with those people. So let's talk about the first part of today's lesson. It says, in other places, particularly the United States and Western Europe, the idea of using private data to monitor citizens has been much more controversial. Yes, in the United States and other countries in Western Europe, they're used to their personal freedom, and they don't like it when the government comes in and says, hey, we want to know where you are all the time. That's what they do in North Korea and in China. Those people are used to that. That's just how things work. If we don't like it, we get in trouble. But in the United States and Western Europe, hey, we're supposed to go wherever we want, whenever we want, and with whoever we want. We don't want big daddy government saying, hey, tell us where you went and why and with who.
Yeah, and privacy is also a right. We're not going to give that up without a fight. So during the introduction, I talked about how here in Taiwan, sure, people have rights, freedom of speech, freedom of privacy, so on and so forth. But they also trust their government agencies, and maybe that trust isn't so strong elsewhere, like in Western Europe or in the United States. By the way, here we have the verb monitor. You can have a computer monitor. That's the screen on your computer where you can actually see the things that you're doing. But here we're using this word as a verb. If you watch something closely, you are monitoring that thing. So when you're monitoring citizens, you're watching those citizens. You're figuring out where they are, where they're going, what they're doing. You're watching after them very closely.
Yeah, people in China are used to this. They know someone's listening to their phone conversations. They know surveillance cameras are recording their every move. They're used to that. But in Western countries, again, such monitoring is controversial, which means people argue about this. There are many topics that are controversial. Gun ownership in the U.S. is very controversial, or abortion or things like that. Here in Taiwan, relations with the mainland or with China are controversial. Some people we should stay away from them. Other people say we should talk to them more, etc. Again, those are controversial issues.
Anyways, many people simply do not trust their governments to use these tracking tools responsibly. Yes, there was a scandal many years ago in the United States. A government agency called the NSA was taking cell phone data, and they were using that to gain information on certain individuals. And this was a big problem, okay? A big betrayal of personal privacy. So this is one of the reasons there that in the West, in the United States, people don't really trust the government or government agencies because they just don't think the government, if given this information, that they'll use these tracking tools in a sensible, responsible way. People just don't have that faith in their government.
Yeah, they need to be responsible. They need to use that data to actually get rid of this disease, not to watch the movements of people and decide to arrest them if they went to some kind of political organization or some meeting and then send them off to a concentration camp where they can beat them and torture them and stuff like that. So yes, we want the government to be responsible with that information, and some people simply don't trust their government. They argue that although privacy laws may sometimes have to be partly relaxed for the greater good of public health, we should not forget that privacy itself is a right that is worth making sacrifices for. So they argue, they say, or they present their position. They say that, yes, privacy laws may have to be partly relaxed sometimes, depending on the situation. Here we're talking about the laws being relaxed, which means basically the laws are not so strict. They're not so enforced. So yes, sometimes we need to relax those laws so that we can help out the greater good.
So here the idea is that you can partly relax some privacy laws every once in a while, but you can never forget that privacy is a right. And you know what? Rights are worth making sacrifices for. Anyways, partly means Not fully, to some extent, maybe just a little bit, not completely, so on and so forth. So you're going to relax, okay, the enforcement procedures behind these laws, okay, but not entirely. Just a bit, okay? You're not going to fully relax the way that you enforce them.
Right, so yes, we do agree that sometimes we do have to give up a little bit of our privacy for the common good. But still at the same time, we do not want to forget that privacy itself is a right that is worth making sacrifices for. In other words, yeah, we shouldn't go too far with this. After all, our privacy is sacred. We should have our own lives, and we shouldn't be totally controlled by the government like they are in North Korea. So yes, indeed, we want to make those sacrifices. Remember, sacrifice here is a noun, something that you give up, basically. You sacrifice a lot when you get married, for example. There I used it as a verb, but here it's being used as a noun. You make sacrifices if you get married, for example.
You make a lot of sacrifices when you get married. That is for sure. Anyway, sure, every once in a while, relax these privacy laws for the greater good of public health. But you can't go overboard. Privacy itself is precious. It's worth making sacrifices for. And individuals shouldn't have to give up that right in an unlimited manner just to serve the public interest. So maybe public health, it suffers a little bit, but some people think that that's a sacrifice worth making. Anyways, folks, with that, it's time for us to take a short break, but don't worry, we'll be back soon.
People are also rebelling against the idea of being forced to stay at home, with anti-lockdown protests taking place in both the US and Europe. They point to countries such as Sweden, which has taken a more relaxed approach to lockdown because citizens are trusted to maintain social distancing. The trade-off, however, has been many, many thousands of certainly avoidable COVID-19 deaths.
第二部分我们看到单字 trade-off 这个字是名词，指妥协、折中方式、权衡、交换条件。例如 Not having much free time is one of the trade-offs of having a full-time job. 全职工作其中一个取舍是没有太多自由的时间。
Okay, let's continue talking about this debate between privacy and the public good. People are also rebelling against the idea of being forced to stay at home, with anti-lockdown protests taking place in both the US and Europe. So first of all, we've got the word rebel here as a verb. That means basically to fight against authority, okay, or fight against the government. For example, a certain area of a country might rebel against the central government. They might have a revolution and try to separate from the country. That's to rebel. That's the verb here. And people are rebelling against the idea of being forced to stay at home. Yeah, I guess after a while, you get what is called cabin fever. You just get sick and tired of being inside all the time, and you finally say, no, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to open the door, I'm going to step outside, and I'm going to go downtown, and I'm going to meet other people, and I don't care what the government says about it. It is my right to get outside the house when I want to. So yes, they're rebelling against the idea of being forced to stay at home. It's like being in prison.
And everything you said there was logical and reasonable and correct. It is your right to go wherever you want, whenever you want. For the most part, there's no law saying, okay, here's the lockdown and here's how we're going to enforce it, okay? People were just expected to do this for the betterment of public health. And again, the problem is that side of the argument also makes sense. So that's where things kind of get really thorny. The issue gets complicated, okay? But yes, people here, they're rebelling against the idea of being forced to stay at home. So they're leaving and they're protesting. They're walking down the streets and saying, hey, we don't like this. They are thumbing their nose at authority. And that's what rebels do very often. By the way, yes, to rebel, that means you go against authority, like Roger was talking about before, or you can be a rebel. You can use that word as a noun. And it says that these people, they're rebelling against this idea with anti-lockdown protests taking place in both the U.S. and Europe. By the way, a protest is a public demonstration. Many people get together in public and they voice how upset they are with the government or with some state of affairs. That's what a protest is all about.
And when you have a protest, of course, you want to bring up some examples that support your position. So here, these people point to countries such as Sweden, which has taken a more relaxed approach to lockdown because citizens are trusted to maintain social distancing. So in this particular case, they're saying, yeah, look at Sweden. They actually trust their citizens. They're not like the U.S. or France or whoever who don't trust their citizens and force them to stay at home. The Swedes basically trust their citizens to maintain social distancing. We know our citizens are going to go out there and interact with other people, but they will wear those face masks and they will stay a certain distance away from other people. They will just do that. Yeah.
And they probably won't get together and protest, which, by the way, is your right, but it's also a great way to spread COVID-19.
Exactly, right. So, yes, they're bringing up Sweden as an example. And the trade-off, however, has been many, many thousands of certainly avoidable COVID-19 deaths. So here we're talking about the trade-off, which could be basically the bad part of it, the dark side, basically. So you've got the good side. People are going out to protest. Of course, they're expressing their freedom. But the trade-off or the sacrifice or the bad thing that happened as a result of this was that lots and lots of people, thousands and thousands of people, died because of COVID-19, and they were avoidable deaths. They could have been avoided. They didn't have to die if people weren't so stubborn about their personal freedom.
There you go. There was an exchange, a trade, and this was the result. This was the trade-off. Anyways, folks, with that, it is time for us to take a break, but don't go away. When we come back, we'll be wrapping up our article on COVID-19, freedom versus public health.
In these uncertain times, one thing is for sure. The delicate balance between freedom and public health will continue to be debated long after this current pandemic has subsided.
第三部分，我们看到形容词 delicate， 指微妙的、精致的、脆弱的。例如 The artist used delicate shades of color in his work. 这位艺术家的作品中运用微妙的不同色调。或是 The display case held several delicate glass animals. 展示柜里有好几个精致的玻璃动物。再举一个例子 These paintings are very delicate, so please be careful. 这些画非常的脆弱，所以请小心。最后我们看到单字 subside， 这个字是动词，指趋缓、平息、消退。例如 My anger began to subside after he apologized in earnest. 听完他真诚的道歉，我的怒气终于平息了。或是 After the doctor gave me an injection, the pain began to subside. 医生给我打了一针之后，疼痛终于消退了。
Okay, here's our final paragraph, and let's summarize the paragraph, and the paragraph summarizes the whole article. It says, in these uncertain times, one thing is for sure, the delicate balance between freedom and public health will continue to be debated long after this current pandemic has subsided. Notice here the third paragraph in our lesson today is actually one full sentence. So let's break it down into smaller parts. In these uncertain times, of course, we don't really know what's happening. We don't really know when this virus is going to go away, or if it's going to come back, or if another virus is going to come. We just don't know. These are uncertain times, but one thing we do know for sure, one thing we are certain about, and that is the following. The delicate balance between freedom and public health will continue to be debated for a long time. So yes, this is a delicate balance. It could go either way. If something's delicate, it could be easily broken.
Here we've got a delicate balance between freedom and public health, okay? Freedom is awesome. It's important to individual citizens, but public health benefits everyone as a whole. So which side are we going to take? Do we actually have to take a side? Oh, I don't know. It's such a delicate balance. Anything could throw this balance out of whack in an instant. Wow, what a delicate situation this is. Anyways, it says here, the delicate balance between freedom and public health will continue to be debated long after this current pandemic has subsided or abated or finally gone away.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Here comes our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分有一个句子写到，他们认为虽然隐私法可能有时得为了公共卫生更大的利益而在某种程度上有所放宽，但我们不应该忘记隐私本身也是一项值得做出牺牲的权利。好，文中的 good 在这边它是当不可数名词来表达好处利益，像 for your own good 就表示为了你自己好，那么 for the good of 加名词则表示为了什么的利益，为了什么的好处。我们课文则是用 for the greater good of public health 来表达为了公共卫生更大的利益。好，那刚刚说到值得做出牺牲，我们来学习 worth 的用法。worth 第一个用法是表达值得什么什么的，用法就是 be worth 加名词或动名词，像是 The novel is worth reading， 这本小说值得一看。 The town is absolutely worth a visit， 那个城镇绝对值得造访。好， worth 的第二个用法可以表达值多少钱，那么用法就是 be worth 加上金额，例如The painting is now worth $5 million， 那幅画现在价值500万美元诶。好，另外有一个固定用法是 worth it， 它可以用来表达值得什么什么的，值得做某事。那么常见的句型有两种，第一种是用 something is worth it， 例如 This laptop is more expensive, but it's worth it， 这台笔电它比较贵，不过它很值得。那么第二个句型是It's worth it 加不定词，就表示值得做某事，其中这个 it 是当虚主词来代替真正的主词不定词 to be， 例如 Do you think it's worth it to spend a lot of money on a luxury watch？ 你认为花很多钱买一只奢华的手表值得吗？好，那么说到 worth， 同学们可能会想到 worthy 这个形容词 W-O-R-T-H-Y， worthy 它也有值得的意思，可是 worth 是用来表达值得某个价格或是行为，而 worthy 则是用来表达值得尊敬啊、重视、支持、赞赏等等的抽象事物，它还可以表达出配得上什么什么的语义。好，那么来看 worthy 的用法是 be worthy of 加名词，或者是 be worthy to 加原形动词。像你可能会听过 be worthy of consideration， 就表示值得考虑。值得考虑它就不是用来表达说某个具体的价值嘛。好，那我们来造两个例句。Her achievements are worthy of respect， 她的成就值得敬仰。John is worthy to be promoted，considering that he has worked here for 20 years. 考虑到 John 已经在这里工作20年了，他有资格被升迁，他是配得上升迁这件事的。好，那么以上是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天单字吧。
Monitor. Patients in hospitals are monitored to see if there are improvements in their health. Partly. The accident was partly caused by ice on the road. Relax.The company decided to relax its dress code during the summer months. Sacrifice. If you want to be successful later, you will need to make some sacrifices. Rebel. Citizens rebelled against the new laws brought in by the government. Protest. Protests against police violence took place in many major cities around the world. Delicate.The delicate relationship between humans and nature must be maintained for the health of the planet.
Discussion Starter starts now!
It's time now for our discussion starter, and the question is, do you think public health is more important than privacy?
I think it's okay for authorities to use our private data to maintain public health because here in Taiwan, we've got a government that we can trust. Further, if this information is being used by the CDC, we're talking about a group of physicians. I can't think of a better group of human beings to deal with our secrets than physicians. So I'm okay as long as, one, we can trust the government, and two, physicians are involved.
Well, you're biased because your father is a doctor, but me, I think private data should never be used by the government because we have too many examples of governments getting people's information and using it against people. They round them up, they capture them, they send them to work camps, they torture them, they imprison them, and they execute them. I think having a bunch of people die from a pandemic is a small price to pay for that.
Okay, everyone. With that, today's article is now complete. But, as always, we sure hope that you guys have enjoyed reading along with us. Anyways, I'm Jeff.
I am Roger.
See you next time.